I think it's weird.
Where does consciousness come from? At first glance, this question looks harmless, respectable, almost polite. The kind of question that wears glasses, drinks tea, and says things like,
Let's have a calm, rational discussion.
but don't be fooled. This question is not your friend. The moment you try to answer it seriously, it quietly locks the door behind you, turns off the lights, and whispers, "Good luck getting out." Because here's the problem. You are conscious right now.
What?
You're watching this. There's a voice in your head narrating my words, maybe with a tone you didn't choose. You didn't hire this voice. It just showed up one day and never left. You might even be judging the video style. That's consciousness. That's you, apparently. But what exactly is that? We can explain how your brain processes information. Neurons fire, signals travel, patterns form. Scientists can point to regions that activate when you feel happy, sad, hungry, or when you remember that embarrassing thing you said in 1922. My apology. In 2022 that nobody else remembers but your brain insists on replaying at 2:37 a.m. for emotional damage. But none of that explains why it feels like anything at all. Why isn't your brain just doing its job silently, like a calculator? Why is there an inner experience? Why does anything have a flavor from the inside? This is what people call the hard problem of consciousness, which is a polite way of saying we have reached the edge of our understanding and are now nervously laughing. So naturally, humans did what humans always do when faced with a mystery. We made theories, lots of them, some elegant, some strange, some that sound like they were invented during a philosophical crisis at 3 a.m. Let's start with the classic idea. Consciousness is produced by the brain. Enough neurons interacting in complex ways, and suddenly, boom, you get awareness, like a cake. Add the ingredients, follow the recipe, and consciousness pops out of the oven. Except, nobody can find the recipe. We know the ingredients, we can see the neurons, but we have no idea why combining them produces experience instead of just activity. It's like building a supercomputer and expecting it to suddenly start having existential thoughts about its childhood. So some people said, maybe we're thinking about this completely wrong. What if the brain doesn't create consciousness? What if it receives it? Imagine your brain as a radio. Smash the radio and the music stops, but the signal is still out there. So maybe your consciousness is not something generated inside your skull, but something your brain is tuning into, which raises a very reasonable follow-up question. Who installed the signal? No idea. Moving on. There's a philosophical idea called panpsychism, which suggests that consciousness is everywhere. Not in a dramatic way. Your toaster is not secretly judging you, but in a subtle sense. The basic building blocks of reality might have tiny bits of experience, like microscopic proto-feelings, which means your mind might be a highly organized collection of these tiny bits, like a massive cosmic group project where somehow everything came together just enough to produce you. Now let's make things worse.
Let's do it.
What if consciousness isn't just everywhere, but is actually the foundation of reality? Think about it. Everything you've ever experienced, the world, people, colors, sounds, exists inside your perception. You've never directly accessed reality. You've only experienced your brain's version of it. So, what if we've been thinking about this backwards? What if matter doesn't create consciousness? What if consciousness creates matter? Yes, that idea, the one that makes you pause and consider whether your coffee is still helping. If that's true, then the universe might not be a physical machine that accidentally produced awareness. It might be something more like a giant experience. And you are one perspective inside it. Which sounds poetic until you realize it raises questions like, why this perspective? Why this life? Why do you have to deal with emails? Still no answers. Now, let's talk about time, because time is another thing that seems normal until you look at it too closely and it quietly breaks. You experience time as a flow, past, present, future. But physics suggests that time might not actually flow at all. All moments could exist at once, like frames in a movie. And your consciousness is just moving through them, creating the illusion of change. Which means your entire life might already exist. Every moment, every decision, every awkward conversation. Congratulations. You are a very complicated bookmark.
Okay.
Now here's where it gets personal. Have you ever noticed that your thoughts just appear? You don't choose them ahead of time. They show up, sometimes useful, sometimes ridiculous, sometimes aggressively unhelpful, like your brain is running a comedy show at your expense. So if you're not choosing your thoughts, who is? Is there a you behind the thoughts? Or is the sense of you just another thought?
Haha, totally. That's crazy. I know, right?
Because when you really look at it, the idea of a solid self starts to feel suspicious, like a character in a story that believes it's the author. Maybe you are not the thinker. Maybe you are the place where thinking happens. Now let's sprinkle in some quantum weirdness,
Okay.
because this conversation isn't confusing enough yet.
Okay.
There are interpretations of quantum physics where observation seems to play a role in how reality behaves. Again, not in a magical, you control everything way, but in a subtle, uncomfortable way. The act of observing is not separate from the system. So, here's a fun question to ruin your day. If consciousness is required to observe reality, then what was reality doing before anything was conscious? Waiting, buffering, displaying a loading screen? We don't know. At this point, you might be hoping for a clean, satisfying answer. Something like, yes, consciousness comes from this specific process, problem solved. Unfortunately, that answer does not exist. Every explanation hits a wall. Either you say consciousness comes from the brain and can't explain why it feels like anything, or you say it's fundamental and now you've just moved the mystery somewhere else. It's like opening a door and finding another door, and behind that door, another door. At some point, you start to suspect the building itself is made of doors. So maybe the problem isn't that we don't have the answer. Maybe the problem is that we expect the answer to look simple, a location, a mechanism, a clear origin. But what if consciousness doesn't have an origin? What if it's not something that comes from anywhere? What if it's just part of existence, always there, always present, not inside the universe, but somehow tied to it in a way we don't yet understand? Yes, that's vague. Welcome to the club. But here's the twist. This isn't necessarily bad news, because it means we are not living in a fully explained, boring universe where everything has been figured out and labeled. We are inside something vast, strange, and deeply mysterious. You are part of a system that can look at itself and ask, "What is this?" That's not normal, that's incredible. You are awareness trying to understand awareness, a mirror trying to reflect itself, a question asking itself. And yes, it's confusing, and yes, it can feel unsettling, but it's also kind of amazing, because it means there is more to discover, more to explore, more to question. So, where does consciousness come from? Maybe from the brain, maybe from the structure of reality, maybe from something we don't even have the language to describe yet. Or maybe it doesn't come from anywhere at all. Maybe it's the thing everything else comes from. And if that's true, then the real mystery isn't just consciousness, it's you. Because whatever consciousness is, you are it, right now. Watching this, thinking, questioning, existing. And that's not a small detail, that's the biggest clue we have. So don't rush to close the question, let it stay open, let it be weird. Because the truth, if it even exists in a form we can understand, is probably far more complex, more absurd, and more fascinating than anything we've imagined so far. Reality is not simple. It's layered. It's strange. It's full of things we don't understand yet. And maybe that's exactly what makes it worth exploring. So stay curious, because if this question made you pause, even for a second, then you're already deeper into the mystery than you think. And trust me, this is just the beginning.